Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today's Development Committee hearing, which is a co-hearing with the Small Business and Zoning Committee. I want to thank Chairman and President Pro Tem A. Troy Miller for joining me this evening to talk about an update to the downtown district in the city of Columbus. The administration, in conjunction with the Downtown Development Commission, as well as other stakeholders in the downtown area, have reviewed the current process for downtown development and have offered recommendations. There has been a process. We'll hear from Vince Papsadero, the administrator of the Columbus Planning Division, as well as Kevin Wheeler, the assistant administrator, about what that process looked like and what the proposed changes are. So without further ado, I want to turn the microphone over to Mr. Papsadero.
Thank you, Councilmember Klein and Councilmember Miller. On behalf of the Development Department, we're very pleased to be here. We're very excited to submit this legislation to Council. The downtown district was created in 1997 and hasn't really been visited since that time in terms of a major update. And in working with the Downtown Commission, we've presented to Council both a more effective and a more efficient zoning district, as well as a new set of design guidelines to better guide and to better inform development decisions downtown. And so worked with a large number of stakeholders in the general public and are very pleased with what's being proposed today. And without further ado, I'll ask Kevin Wheeler, the Assistant Administrator, to walk through an overview of the proposal.
Thank you. This presentation has 12 slides.
I want to make sure that you're on the mic so that TV can pick that up.
Okay.
I don't think so. Is there a button that you need to push, or maybe use Mr. Papsadero?
Sorry.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Is there... I'm waiting for the presentation to come on full screen. Where's... Oh, all right. Okay. Just a few facts about downtown, the kinds of things that are fun to be able to tell folks. There are 4,000 parcels that comprise downtown. It's 2.4 square miles, 1,500 acres, and about 5,500 residents currently. Those residents are joined by 100,000 workers, and they have available to them 76,000 parking spaces. 8 million visitors a year is a recent estimate. The existing code for downtown was adopted in 1997. It includes vision, goal, and guidelines language, and it was pretty revolutionary for that time in Columbus in that it took all the different districts that comprise downtown and eliminated them in favor of one comprehensive district that was administered or overseen by one review body. And the district allowed most uses in the downtown pending design review. It also eliminated parking requirements, which previously had been in place for downtown, just as they would be in suburban portions of the city. There are, in the current code, existing code, limits regarding new parking lots, new surface parking lots, as that had been and continues to be an issue in downtown. Both specific and optional standards are included in the existing code, sometimes about the same topic. So an example might be that the code would require 0 setback, but it would allow the latitude of the commission to vary that setback based on specific site conditions. 16 years later, I guess, since we've had that much time to work with the code, hundreds of projects have been reviewed and approved by the Downtown Commission. Parks and civic improvements, cultural venues, office buildings, residential buildings, et cetera. And generally the code has worked really well, but anytime you create something new, you learn from experience that you might want to do things a little differently the next time. And so I think that existing code was supposed to be reviewed every 5 years or so. We're a little late, but we're making up for that with a lot of comprehensive review and changes. The current proposal is a result of the commission, downtown commission, working directly with our staff. The current code update highlights include streamlining and reordering the code. It's much shorter than the existing code, and it also relies on a hybrid approach, taking a lot of the individual topical requirements and standards and instead treating them as guidelines. They were more or less often in guidelines language anyway, but in this way we've taken the guidelines and put them in a separate document. And this is, as I said, it's kind of a hybrid approach and one that we feel works well for downtown because of the variety of situations that you encounter in downtown. It's hard to come up with a set of very standard requirements for height and setback, lot width, and so on that works downtown. It's not like other parts of the city. Highlights with respect to the new code continued. The purpose and commission sections were updated. The commission section in the existing code is at the back, and they play obviously a pivotal role in the whole process. So that section's been moved to the front. The certificate of appropriateness, which is what something is called when it's what the approval is called that the Downtown Commission provides for a project that's reviewed. The applicability and process have been clarified, so there's a list of what requires a certificate of appropriateness. There's no question about that, as well as the process used to pursue it. Staff approvals, that's something that benefits everybody in terms of expedited review, and that's been added to the code. The permitted uses section has been updated. Also, the uses that are permitted only by certificate of appropriateness, sort of like conditional uses, have been updated and linked to special permits, which is another section of the zoning code. Demolition and historic preservation link has been established, and what we mean here is that really over the last several decades, downtown's lost a lot of buildings, and in situations where a building is proposed for demolition, the commission wanted to make sure that to the extent possible we could know that that was only happening because something better was going to replace it. And the way this change works is that if a building is historic based on its being part of the Columbus Register or the National Register, or it meets the qualifications or criteria to be listed as determined by the city's historic preservation officer, then the commission could say, okay, but we'll condition demolition on your filing the permit for the new replacement use. So the demolition maybe can go forward, but we want you to wait till you're ready to begin with your new building. And the fact of the matter is that you could file a building permit and maybe not finish your building, but at least this is a way of preserving to the extent possible older buildings until the time is ready for them to be replaced by something that's bringing more to the community. Sections that were eliminated or shifted to the guidelines element include all the sub-districts. Those have actually been eliminated. We found that there were sub-districts in downtown that were really not distinct in terms of the existing code, and in practice were not meaningfully observed. There's a transparency overlay of the downtown that speaks to window clearance. That's better handled, we feel, through the guidelines. And then topical sections, which I've already given examples of: height, setback, rooftops, et cetera. An example I like to use of the height restrictions is that North Bank condominiums is in a district that would have required a much lower building because that's just the way the existing code is written. It focuses the highest heights in the core along High Street, high and broad, and that makes sense, but there's really nothing to be gained by having a lot of different height limits all over downtown. I think we would like to encourage density. So that has been eliminated. Instead, we encourage a minimum of, I believe it's 2 stories or 3 stories throughout downtown, not require, but encourage. And then in key areas like High Street, encouraging 5 stories or more as a way to really intensify the core. Also, another important change in the update compared to the current code is that we've really clarified the relationship between the Downtown Commission and two other commissions. The first is the Art Commission, which did not exist when the Downtown Commission was put in place. And what we've done is taken the Downtown Commission out of the public art approval business. They were in a position of approving the location, not the content, but the location of public art in the downtown. The new code would propose that they would provide a non-binding recommendation to the Art Commission that is, has codified authority for that very topic. And so they could provide insight based on their experience, but then the Art Commission would be responsible for making the decision. In the case of the Historic Resources Commission, any building that's listed on the Columbus Register, either individually or as part of a district, changes to those buildings, exterior changes, and the site go through the Historic Resources Commission. They also need Downtown Commission review, and we wanted to clear that up as much as possible by stating in code that the final approval will rest with the Downtown Commission. The Historic Resources Commission, or HRC, will review projects at a higher level of detail, focusing on historic resource issues, and then when they are done, Downtown Commission can take their final action. Because both of those commissions are staffed, actually, as is the Art Commission, within one division, we coordinate as staff, and to the extent possible, we try to work those processes in a way that's as coordinated as possible so that there's not a lot of time lost. You can go through them at the same time, but the final decision would be, or final action would be the Downtown Commission. Okay. Things that haven't changed, there's still one primary review body. We don't have cases going to the Board of Zoning Adjustment or the Graphics Commission or the Development Commission. They all go to the Downtown Commission. Most uses are still permitted in the downtown pending review and design review. Parking is still not required in the downtown. That's pivotal. And non-conforming uses that were established legally prior to the changes that went into effect in 1997, and any subsequent changes associated with this have non-conforming status and the protection afforded those uses through the non-conforming section of the zoning code. Okay, design guidelines. The current set of code, the current code does include, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of guidelines language as well as goal language. And one of the things that we tried to do as we reviewed that was put guidelines language in guidelines and not in code. It's very difficult to have a lot of vague references in code. It raises questions when we try to review projects and implement things. So those elements have been taken out of the code and put in design guidelines and updated. We now have a comprehensive set of design guidelines that's before you for consideration where there previously weren't any, and they're designed to work in conjunction with the code. And they are, the whole objective is to allow flexibility. They are not deliberately, these are not requirements. These are shoulds, not shalls. These are framing objectives for development, but also doing that within a flexible framework. The guidelines are informed by a series of design principles. These are summarized. I'll just quickly go through them. One is that the downtown is a center of government, business, and culture. Two, it's a neighborhood of its own. Three, it's a place for regional scale open space and cultural activities. Four, it's a dynamic built environment, and we want to emphasize design and quality. 5, adaptive reuse is something that we are prioritizing. 6, support of multiple transportation options, more so downtown than any place else. 7, this is an opportunity to promote energy and excitement. 8, it's also an opportunity to really highlight the possibilities of sustainable design and construction. And then finally, the Commission views itself as providing a public forum regarding the built environment in downtown. Topics that are covered by the design guidelines are there on the next slide, and these run from ad murals, which has a page of its own, to awnings and entrance canopies, graphics, historic resources, outdoor dining, parking, public and private art, rooftop uses and site work. I won't read them all. I've just read about half of them. But each of these topics has its own section within the design guidelines. Okay, process. a lot of paper has been generated, a lot of emails. Going through the process, as I said earlier, we started out, staff in the planning division, working with the downtown commission, sort of getting a sense from them about what they felt worked and what didn't work. We have Mike Lusk with us. Mike's sitting directly behind me, and Mike is one of the downtown commissioners that gave a lot of his time and energy. You know, they come to these meetings as volunteers, and we had a number of working sessions with them, and I want to thank them for that. We spent a lot of time consulting with the city attorney's office about potential changes, and also underwent department and division review throughout the city. In March, we unveiled a public review draft and sent out email notices. I think that the standard list that I sent to has about 200 plus names on it, and then that gets forwarded beyond that to lots of other lists. We sent a property owner mailing to all the downtown property owners, and that involved about 2,500 letters, big mailing. And then we had a public comment period that ultimately was about 2 months long. We had 13 written submissions from individuals and organizations during that time period, and we had a public meeting on April 23rd. We had some media coverage. I think Business First had a mention of us, Columbus Underground, and then the Dispatch had a fair amount of coverage, actually. Discussions were held with interested parties, stakeholder groups, the BSRC, that's the Building Services Review Committee or Council, CDDC, CODA, the Downtown Residents Association, Leadership, Ohio Health, the Downtown Special Improvement District boards, and then Verizon Wireless that brought us some information about small cell technology and just the reality of telecommunications. We also had extensive web presence throughout. That's something that we were pretty interested in maintaining, and we maintained an active and up-to-date website that was used pretty heavily. Finally, after that whole process, we made some revisions to the March public review drafts. Those were submitted to the Downtown Commission. They approved the final version of items with a few amendments on June 11th. The Development Commission approved the same set of the same proposal on June 13th. And at that point, we submitted legislation, and that's where we're at tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler, for the presentation. I failed to introduce the Director of Development, Director Shoney. Would you like to offer any comments as well?
Thank you, Councilman Klein, Councilman Miller. No extensive comments. Just thank you for your time and interest in this process. And again, I would also like to thank the members of the Downtown Commission and all the residents and other stakeholders that had their input. It's been a very thorough process.
Yeah, I want to echo that as well. The amount of time that was put in by the groups that you mentioned, all of which were volunteer basis. Thank you for doing that to make our downtown better and making it a desirable place not only to live, but for businesses to work there, for people to work, for businesses to relocate there, for business or for employees to work there, and making it a desirable place. It doesn't go unnoticed that all of the terrific things that we have in the city of Columbus is really driven by its residents and by volunteers and by folks that live in that work in the Columbus area. So thank you on behalf of the Columbus City Council. President Pro Tem Miller, do you have any thoughts or questions that you want to present to Mr. Papsadero or Mr. Wheeler?
Just to thank them for all their efforts in the development department and your efforts in doing this. And what's important to me is also, as we look at the city of Columbus and we look at our code, is like we have to really update things for the 21st century. And I think it's important that this is just another step in doing that. So thank you for all your efforts and also the Downtown Commission.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Wheeler. On the link between the demolition and the certificate of appropriateness that's being issued, is that only for properties that are currently on the register and then could be on the register? So if a property is not on the register and could not be eligible for the register, then how does that process differ versus a property that is on the register, for example?
Okay, currently the Downtown Commission does review proposals for demolition with the existing code, and the expectation is that if you're going to demolish a building and you want a certificate of appropriateness to do that, that you would have a plan for a new building in place. If you don't have a plan for a new building, then, you know, what's the plan otherwise? Those two sort of objectives or two alternatives remain in place, but what has changed is that in cases where a building is either on the Columbus or National Register or is eligible based on established criteria, and in those instances, the commission would ask the historic preservation officer, is this building eligible? And in order to just make extra sure that the building isn't demolished sort of speculatively, because sometimes, buildings might be approved for demolition and then things may go wrong with the financing of a deal, or any number of things can happen that would result in the building coming down, but then the proposed new use doesn't ever take place. And the idea here is that given the number of buildings we've lost in downtown Columbus, this would just be an extra step for buildings that are viewed as historic. If a building is not determined to be eligible for listing on the registers, essentially the criteria is very, very much mirrors for both the local and national, then that particular provision would never come into play. And it does not mean that you can't, that they can't approve the demolition of a building. It simply means that there'd be that extra connection saying, let's wait on this until we're ready to move forward with the new building, if that's the objective.
And what is the time frame? And the time frame of determining whether something would be historic if it's not currently listed. And the second part is, who would have the ability, for lack of better words, standing to step in and say this needs to be checked for eligibility?
A couple different answers to that question. One is the commission, the way the code is written as proposed, the commission has the authority to ask the question. So it's within their authority to ask city staff, is this building eligible to be listed? Per the guidelines and practice, the city's historic preservation officer would make that determination. He does that currently under a programmatic agreement with the state of Ohio for all HUD-funded projects here at the city, and typically does anywhere from 250 to 300 determinations a year under the Section 106 review process. Those are typically turned around in a day. And so he would apply the standards, and there are basically two questions are asked. One, is the building 40 years of age or older? If their answer is yes, then the second question is the architecture of that building significantly intact? Has it been significantly modified to a degree that architecture is not intact any longer? And if that's the case, that the architecture is no longer intact, then it would not be eligible to be listed. And there are examples of buildings downtown where there have been major modifications done to front elevations of buildings that might have been built in the 19th century that have principally just removed all those architectural features. That's an example of a building that is no longer eligible because those features are gone. And so it's a determination made by Randy Black. He applies to the Secretary of the Interior standards and asking those two questions. Very straightforward process, very quick turnaround.
So if I understand correctly, if a developer is going through the process and they're before, and I want to start by saying the developer is going through the process with a building that is not currently on a register.
Correct.
And they get to the Downtown Development Commission. And if no member asks, then it would just be the way the current code is written, correct, with the changes being proposed, because it's not going to be historic.
Correct. The commission would have to specifically ask that the staff.
And can that be done before a meeting so that it can be so a determination can be in place for an upcoming meeting, or is that something that needs to be done formally at the meeting so they don't have to wait till the next meeting? I'm just trying to figure out the process, from a developer standpoint to make, this as business friendly as possible, but at the same time still respect the process that's being enacted.
Absolutely. And I think as staff, we would recommend to an applicant that if it appears as if a building, if there's a question, could this be eligible? If they would like us to make that determination, we could do that up front. Absolutely. I mean, there's absolutely no problem in us doing that. And that would inform the developer whether or not that could be an issue for consideration. And then we would move down the road in terms of being before the commission and then having them decide whether or not they want to consider that as a piece of information in making their decision about the demolition certificate of approval.
And the difference then in the end would be that if the determination is made that it has historical significance, then not only would the developer have the demolition permit, but would also have to have a building permit? Is that what I'm...
So if a building is determined to be eligible, the commission would take that into consideration and decide whether or not to require that the demolition COA be, in a sense, set aside until the applicant filed for a building permit with the Building and Zoning Services Department, which signifies that they've taken an investment in terms of architecture and engineering to design a structure. So that's the link, and it's optional. It's at the discretion of the Downtown Commission in considering a project.
Okay.
That one linkage between the two requirements. And the commission, in our discussions with the commission over multiple workshops and doing an online survey actually to present options on this issue, there was consensus that that was what they felt would be the appropriate procedure to put in place to address this issue.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. President Pro Tem Miller?
Just one quick question. When you dealt with the determination by the officer, if he's on vacation, is that given to someone else? I mean, you say there's a day turnaround. So what would be the procedure for that?
Yes, we have three assistant historic preservation officers on the staff, and the senior one has been with the city for 10 to 15 years and serves as the acting preservation officer when Randy is on vacation. So there would be no delay whatsoever with Randy out of the office.
Okay. Any other closing comments? I don't think we have any speaker slips, so I want to give you the opportunity to maybe wrap up if you have anything additionally to add, not only for yourself, but Mr. Wheeler or the director.
I would certainly just want to thank the Downtown Commission in particular for all of their efforts in this process. They worked along with us, throughout the entire length of this effort. And to also thank the stakeholders and the members of the public who came to our meetings. We had some very enthusiastic individuals who gave us a lot of comments. We responded, and they became important to the commission in its deliberation. So it's important to acknowledge that effort on the part of the public.
Okay. That concludes our hearing. I thank you for taking the time and presenting this, and we'll have this under for council's consideration now that we've had a public hearing. So thank you for putting the time in from the administration side to, again, make our city a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you.